Welcome to Corrupt. I'm Charlie Cruz. Today we're looking at a procurement operation running weapons components to Russia. Not from a safe house, not from a dead drop, but from a functioning airline office on an upper floor of a Tokyo tower. The reason it worked there and not anywhere else comes down to one sentence in Japanese law. Let's get into it. Inside a real airline office on an upper floor of a Tokyo tower, a man in a suit is quietly buying the microchips that will guide Russian missiles. And in this country, what he's doing isn't technically a crime. That's the whole scheme, right there. Not a break-in, not a dead drop under a park bench. A procurement pipeline feeding chips, transmitters and weapons machinery components to the Kremlin, run almost in the open, because someone worked out that Japan is the one advanced democracy where getting caught carries almost no legal consequence. Roughly 120 Russian intelligence officers reportedly operating in the country, and the man at the center of it walked out the door when the story broke. Let me walk you through how that works. Start with what happened after the invasion of Ukraine. Western capitals expelled hundreds of Russian intelligence officers. Whole networks in Europe and North America went dark overnight. Those officers needed somewhere to go, and more importantly, the Kremlin needed to replace the supply channels it had just lost. Sanctions had cut off the microchips and dual-use industrial tech that a modern war runs on. So the shopping didn't stop. It just moved. It moved to Tokyo. And the reason it moved to Tokyo is the whole point of this episode. Japan has no general law against espionage. Read that again, because it's the engine of everything. The postwar constitution enshrines privacy of communications and freedom of expression, and outside of military personnel and contractors, there is simply no statute that makes spying a crime. A foreign agent caught buying export-controlled technology is not committing espionage in the eyes of a Japanese prosecutor. There is nothing to charge him with. Back in the 80s, there was an attempt to pass an anti-spy law. One version of it carried a death penalty, and it collapsed under public backlash, so the gap stayed open, and decades later, someone finally decided to drive a truck through it. Here's how the mechanism runs. You don't hide. Hiding is what spies do in countries where spying is illegal. In Japan, the smart play is the opposite. You operate under legitimate business cover, in a real office, doing real paperwork, with a shopping list for the war layered underneath. The core procurement operation ran out of the Tokyo office of Aeroflot, the Russian majority state-owned airline, inside Toranomon Kotohira Tower, a functioning airline office, real employees, real airline business, and working out of it, undercover as an Aeroflot employee, a 49-year-old operative named Maxim Vladimirovich Filchenkov. He's booking cargo, on paper. Underneath, he's sourcing microchips, transmitters, and the machinery used to build weapons. Layer on the institutional continuity. The Russian trade representation in Tokyo reportedly always keeps one senior post staffed by an SVR officer, the Foreign Intelligence Service, the direct successor to the KGB's overseas division. So this isn't one man improvising. It's a permanent seat at a diplomatic adjacent table, handed down, giving the whole network legitimacy that a normal spy ring never gets. Now here's the part that tells you the system was working exactly as designed. Japanese police did once catch something, a machine tool company employee handing trade secrets to a suspected SVR operative. Caught. And the only tool prosecutors had was to refer it as a case of unfair competition, commercial law, a business dispute, not spying, because there's no such charge. There is a specially designated Secrets Act, passed just over a decade ago, tops out at 10 years, but it covers leaking state secrets. It does nothing about a foreign agent buying dual-use industrial tech off the open market. And understand, Japan is not blind. The country runs a signals intelligence directorate, around 1,700 staff across 6 facilities, going back to the 50s, with American cooperation. They can listen. What they couldn't do was arrest the man they were listening to. The gap was never surveillance. The gap was legal. You can watch a man commit the crime and have no crime to charge him with. That's the trick. Not tradecraft. Legal arbitrage. You take the network you lost in the West and you rebuild it in the one place where exposure is the worst thing that can happen to you. Every operation has a weak point. Usually it's a man who thinks he's cleverer than everyone watching him. This one's weak point was different. This one had no legal consequence to fear, which meant the only thing that could touch it was being seen. So it got seen. There was no arrest, no wiretap warrant, no lab result, no informant flipping in a stairwell. The break was journalism. On a July morning, New York Times reporters published a Den of Spies investigation that named the Aeroflot-run procurement operation and named Filchenkov specifically. Put his face and his cover in print, and with no charge available, exposure was the entire enforcement mechanism. The story was the consequence. The story was the only consequence anyone had. Within days, Filchenkov left Japan. His departure was first reported by the Yomiuri Shimbun and confirmed by a Ukrainian intelligence official speaking anonymously. He didn't flee a warrant because there wasn't one. He didn't post bail. He walked to an airport and got on a plane because the country he'd been operating in had no legal mechanism to stop him. Think about that. The most a democracy could do to a man running weapons components to a war was write about him until he found the door inconvenient. The government spokesman, Chief Cabinet Secretary Minoru Kihara, acknowledged the growing threat and declined to comment on the specific case, which is roughly all the state could offer. Acknowledgement. Nobody was arrested. Nobody was charged. Filchenkov simply exited. There is no dollar figure attached to what moved through that Aeroflot channel, no itemized manifest of confirmed shipments in the public record. The audacity here was never a number. It was the operating principle. But the exposure did produce a structural response. Under Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, Japan passed the National Intelligence Council Establishment Act, creating a Prime Minister-chaired council and a roughly 700-strong National Intelligence Bureau to run counterintelligence. New legislation targeting foreign operatives is expected soon, and a foreign intelligence agency, a rough equivalent to the CIA or MI6, is slated to begin operating within a couple of years. The gap is being closed, just years after the man they wanted to catch had already checked out. Here's the flat truth of it. Most spies get away with it by staying invisible. This one got away with it by being perfectly visible in the one country where visibility was legal. Thanks for listening to Corrupt. I'm Charlie Cruz. New episode next week. Another scheme, another mechanism worth understanding. See you then.
Grep News. Thomas.